July 27, 1943. 11:41 p.m. North Sea coast, Germany.
The bunker sweats.
Not from heat, though the air is stale and thick with cigarette smoke, but from pressure.
From the way every man inside can feel the night tightening, like a hand closing into a fist.
A radar operator leans forward until his face is almost touching the green glow of the scope. The room is lit by instruments, ghostly circles, thin lines, the faint pulse of sweeping beams. On the wall, a clock ticks with the patience of something that doesn't have to die tonight.
Outside, the wind carries salt off the water.
Inside, it carries something else, anxiety you can taste at the back of your throat.
He's done this shift before.
Hundreds of sweeps, thousands of returns. He knows the difference between a fishing boat and a patrol craft, between weather and trouble. He knows how a raid looks when it's forming, how the screen begins to thicken, how small blips become strings, how strings become a tide. Tonight, he's waiting for that tide. Because Hamburg has become a target with a pulse. Everyone knows it now. Not just the sailors and dockworkers along the Elbe, not just the flak crews and firefighters, but the men in rooms like this, men who fight with pencils and headsets and light on glass. For nights, the British have been probing, measuring. And then, days ago, the first hammer blow came down.
The city didn't just burn.
It announced itself, black smoke by day, red glow by night, like a wound that refused to close.
So the operator watches the scope like a man watching a door he knows will open. A telephone rings, sharp, impatient.
A duty officer answers, voice clipped, controlled. Somewhere behind him, a plotting table waits with paper maps, grease pencils, hands that will draw lines toward death. The operator feels the cold of the concrete through his boots. You can almost feel it too, how the bunker steals warm from you, how it makes you aware of your own breathing, your own heartbeat.
The sweep comes around again.
The scope is mostly clean, thin speckles, the usual noise.
Then, at the edge, a faint bloom. He blinks, leans closer. Another sweep.
The bloom holds, subtle but there, like mist forming where it shouldn't. He adjusts a knob, tries to sharpen the return.
The line thickens. A second operator looks over. A pause. No jokes, no casual comments tonight.
The duty officer steps in, posture stiffening. What is it? The operator doesn't answer right away, because in his bones he already knows the worst part. Once you speak it, it becomes real.
He taps the screen. Contacts, Beyelding.
On the plotting table, a pencil begins to move. The German air defense system is a machine, and machines begin to turn long before the first bomb falls. Signals travel.
Codes are spoken.
Orders pass through headsets into men's ears. Night fighter pilots in readiness rooms, flak units standing by their guns, searchlight crews checking power and angles. The operator watches the blips, but something is wrong. The returns aren't resolving the way they should. A raid usually forms with shape, direction, density, a sense of intention.
This looks smeared. Like someone dragged a brush across the screen.
The duty officer frowns. The operator tries another adjustment. The picture doesn't improve.
And then,
the scope begins to snow. At first it's delicate, almost pretty, fine glittering specks that sparkle across the green. It looks like static, like interference.
Like a storm of tiny reflections.
Then it grows. The specks multiply until the screen is no longer a window, it's a wall.
The operator's mouth dries.
His fingers move faster on the controls, chasing clarity.
He tries to filter. He tries to tune.
He tries anything that will make the ghosts return to solid targets. But the ghosts are winning.
The plotting table hesitates. The pencil pauses mid-line.
The duty officer's voice tightens.
Confirm.
Are those aircraft? The operator stares, jaw clenched.
He can't.
Because the screen is lying to him now. Or worse, it's telling him the truth in a language he doesn't understand.
A technician is called.
Another man steps in, sleeves rolled, face drawn with fatigue and disbelief. He watches the scope for 3 sweeps.
4.
His expression shifts from annoyance to dread. Malfunction, the duty officer demands. The technician shakes his head slowly, as if he's afraid the room itself might hear him. It's not the set.
A new call comes in.
Another station reporting the same.
Another, farther inland.
The reports stack up like sandbags, but they don't stop the flood. Across the network, radar screens are turning to nonsense. The operator feels something in his chest, not fear exactly.
Not yet. More like betrayal.
Because radar is supposed to be certainty. It is supposed to see through darkness, through cloud, through the tricks of night. It is supposed to give you the enemy before the enemy gives you death. Tonight, the certainty is dissolving. The duty officer snatches a headset and barks into it, demanding clarity from someone who doesn't have it. His free hand is clenched into a fist so tight the knuckles shine white under the instrument glow. The operator watches the screen, and in the blizzard of returns he realizes something that makes his stomach drop.
The noise isn't random. It's everywhere. Too uniform. Too deliberate.
Like someone has thrown a veil over the entire sky. And somewhere out there, beyond the bunker, beyond the coast, beyond the reach of the searchlights, hundreds of engines are moving in the dark. You can't see them from here. Not with the naked eye. Not even with the tools that are supposed to make you powerful. All you can see is a screen turning into snow. A voice crackles through the headset, urgent, strained. Night fighters are asking for vectors.
They need a heading. A height. Something to chase.
The duty officer turns toward the operator, and for the first time the operator sees it plainly on another man's face. If we can't see them, we can't stop them. A low rumble rolls faintly through the concrete, distant, almost imagined.
The operator freezes. It's not thunder. It's too steady. Too heavy.
He looks back at the scope, and the snow keeps falling, beautiful and merciless, while out over the water, the invisible tide is already closing on Hamburg. And in the far distance, beyond the horizon, the night begins to glow, just a little, like the first match struck in a city made of fuel. The first glow on the horizon isn't a fire yet. It's a hint, a smear of pale color where the night should be absolute. Inside the bunker, the radar snow keeps thickening, swirling across the scope in a pattern that feels intentional, like a hand shaking a bag of dust over the entire sky. The operator's fingertips are numb on the dials. The technician has stopped pretending this is fixable. And out over the black water, the answer is already falling. High above the cloud tops, a bomber stream pushes eastward in long, disciplined silence, broken only by engine vibration and the occasional clipped phrase through oxygen masks. The aircraft are heavy and stable, 4 engines each, wings that seem too broad for something built to carry destruction. In the cockpit of a Lancaster, the pilot holds course with small corrections. He doesn't need to see Germany to feel it approaching.
The air changes. The tension changes.
Even the darkness feels different, like it has weight. Behind him, the navigator's table glows faintly.
Red light. Pencil marks. Time checks. Bearings.
A map that is more prayer than paper. Somewhere in the fuselage, a crewman grips a bundle that looks almost ridiculous in a war fought with steel and fire. Thin strips of metal foil, cut to length, packed like harmless confetti.
Window.
It's a simple word for something that turns certainty into blindness. For months the British had debated using it. Not because it wouldn't work, but because it would work too well. The Germans had radar.
The British knew it.
The Germans knew the British knew it. And everyone understood the same cold truth, the kind that makes planners stare into space and forget to blink.
Once you show the enemy a trick like this, you can take it back.
So window had been held, protected like a secret weapon.
Until Hamburg.
Until Air Marshal Arthur Harris and Bomber Command decided the air war needed a new cruelty to break the old defenses.
In the Lancaster S belly, the rear gunner stares into the dark behind them. Somewhere back there, the night fighters should be waiting. Somewhere down below, the flak batteries should be tracking.
The gunner imagines black shapes climbing to meet them, cannons flashing, a bomber bursting like a torn lantern.
He swallows hard.
Then the intercom crackles. A calm voice, practiced, almost casual. The kind of tone that makes fear more frightening because it sounds so normal. Window now. The crewman opens the chute. At first nothing happens, and you can almost feel the momentary disbelief, like a man waiting for a switch to work. Then the foil begins to spill out.
It doesn't fall like a stone. It floats. It flutters.
It catches the air and drifts in a long shimmering stream that spreads and spreads.
The bomber doesn't vanish. It's still there, loud, solid, alive.
But on the ground, to the men staring at green scopes, it has just multiplied into 100 ghosts. The foil strips reflect radar waves. Each strip becomes a false return, a tiny bright lie.
Enough lies, and the whole picture collapses.
In the German bunker, the operator's jaw tightens as the snow grows denser.
A superior officer steps closer, face sharp with anger and fear.
He wants answers that do not exist.
You retelling me the sky is full of nothing. The operator doesn't look away from the screen. I'm telling you the sky is full of everything. Another call comes in, frontage. Another station. Another sector.
The same phenomenon. The same blindness. The night fighter control rooms begin to choke on their own procedures. Pilots ask for vectors, and controllers hesitate. Headings are given, then corrected again. The searchlights below sweep in wide arcs, stabbing empty darkness, hunting shapes they cannot find. And somewhere up there, the bomber stream keeps moving, the aircraft spaced with lethal discipline, each one following the next, each one trusting that the machine of deception is working. Because on nights like this, trust is survival. Across northern Germany, air raid sirens start to wail. long, rising howls that crawl into homes and hearts and pull people from beds. In Hamburg, families stumble into stairwells and cellars, clutching blankets, shoes, children half awake and already crying. You can hear it in your mind, that sound of hurried feet, doors slamming, the thin panic that rides on the edge of every breath. But the warnings are wrong.
Or late. Or confused.
Some districts hear sirens and then silence and then sirens again, like the city itself can't decide whether to fear. Up in the bombers, the first pathfinders reach the target area. You can almost feel their concentration tighten, the way a crew leans into their job as if the aircraft responds to effort. Below them, Hamburg is a dark shape threaded by water and streets. The Elbe is a black ribbon.
The docks are a sleeping beast.
Then the first markers fall. Small lights, then brighter ones, then a pattern begins to form, a deliberate constellation placed onto streets and rooftops. For a moment it's almost beautiful, as if someone is decorating the city for a celebration it never asked for. And then the main force arrives. The first high explosives hit with a deep, chest-shaking violence.
Roofs lift. Windows blow inward.
Air itself becomes a weapon, slamming doors off hinges and tossing furniture like toys.
The ground shudders.
In shelters, you hear the impact as a distant hammering, then a nearer crack, then a roar that makes you wonder if the next sound will be the last sound. The flak batteries fire anyway, because that's what they do. They throw shells into the dark, hoping to intersect something they can't properly track.
Guns flash, searchlights sweep.
But the bomber stream is slipping through the defense like water through fingers. And now the horizon glow becomes a color.
Orange, then red.
Then a hard white brightness that pulses with every new wave of explosions. From the bunker, someone steps outside for a second, into the open air, and looks toward the city. Hamburg is no longer a place in the dark.
It is a furnace.
The operator in the bunker turns back to his scope, and for the first time he understands what the snow on his screen really means. Not just a technical failure.
Not just a trick.
It means the enemy has found a way to walk past the locked door of night. Above Hamburg, incendiaries begin to fall in dense patterns, scattering like sparks from a giant's hand.
Rooftops catch. Attics ignite.
Whole blocks start to glow from within. And the air itself begins to change.
Hotter. Drier. Thirsty.
As if the city is drawing breath for something it doesn't yet understand. Inside a shelter, a woman presses her hand to the concrete wall and feels it trembling.
Dust sifts down like fine ash.
Somewhere nearby, a child asks a question no one answers. Outside, the fires start reaching for each other across streets.
Not yet a single blaze, but close.
Close enough that you can sense what's coming, even if you don't know the word for it.
Because soon, Hamburg won't just burn. It will begin to breathe.
The first fires are scattered at first, little islands of flame in a sea of darkness. But Hamburg is not a normal city tonight. It's dry from heat, stressed from earlier raids, threaded with timber roofs, packed warehouses, fuel, paper, textiles. The kind of place that doesn't simply catch, it feeds.
Incendiaries strike and bloom in the attics.
You hear the sharp crack of them, like 1,000 matchsticks snapping at once.
Then the hiss.
Then the roar as air rushes toward the hungry orange.
Fire crews surge into the streets, helmets glinting under the strobing light of explosions. Hoses uncoil. Pumps strain.
Men shout over the rising thunder of impacts. For a moment, it looks like the system might hold, like training and discipline and bravery might keep the flames separated. Then the next wave hits.
High explosives slam down again, and the city's bones begin to break. Streets heave. Roof tiles rain down. Water mains rupture.
A pump crew opens a hydrant and gets nothing.
Or a weak spit.
Or a pressure that dies as quickly as it came. A firefighter stares at the limp hose in his hands, and you can almost feel the cold panic in his stomach. The tools are failing. The city's own arteries are severed. Above them, the bombers keep coming, steady as a metronome. Inside one Lancaster, the bomb aimer's face is taut behind his oxygen mask. He lies prone over glass, looking down at a world that suddenly isn't black anymore. Marker flares burn in colors, green, red, white, pinning the target area like nails. The city below flickers as if a giant is taking photographs with a flash. He speaks into the intercom, voice calm because he has to be calm. Left, left, steady, steady. Then the release. The aircraft lurches slightly as weight falls away, and somewhere below, another building becomes dust and flame and noise. You can feel the momentary relief up here.
Not moral relief, just physical, like a man exhaling after holding his breath too long.
They've dropped their load. They've done their piece of the job. Now they must survive the exit. But Hamburg is doing something new. It's starting to pull the sky into itself.
At street level, the heat thickens.
Smoke doesn't rise cleanly. It churns, trapped between buildings and shoved sideways by gusts that weren't there minutes ago. A woman in a stairwell presses a damp cloth to a child's face.
The air tastes like bitter metal.
Each breath feels used. Down in the shelters, people try to stay quiet because quiet feels like control. You hear muffled praying.
Someone coughs.
Someone whispers that the wall is warm. Someone answers, too sharply, it's always warm. But even as they say it, they know that isn't true.
The temperature climbs in steps, like someone turning a dial.
Outside, fire crews retreat from one street and discover the next street is already lost. They turn a corner and meet a wall of radiant heat that forces them back like an invisible hand. Their eyes sting. Their throats burn. The air itself is attacking them. And then the separate fires begin to connect.
A block here. Another there.
Flames reaching across roofs, across courtyards, across alleys like fingers clasping. A firestorm doesn't start with a single dramatic moment. It starts with a realization, first by the men fighting it, then by the people running from it, then by the city itself, that the fire is no longer one emergency among many. It is becoming the atmosphere.
The wind rises.
Not the gentle wind of weather, but a violent, purposeful wind that seems to come from the ground. It drags oxygen into the inferno as if the flames have lungs. It howls between buildings.
It slams doors. It sucks smoke through streets like a living thing.
You can almost hear the city breathing. Somewhere in an open square, loose paper lifts into the air and spirals like snow. But it's not snow. It's ash. It's burning fragments that land on coats and hair and ignite new points of panic. A man tries to run and finds the wind pushing against him, hot and relentless. He grabs a child's wrist, and the child's hand is slick with sweat. They stagger toward the river because the river feels like safety, like the only thing fire can't take.
Then another blast hits.
The shock wave cracks windows that somehow survived the earlier strikes.
Glass rains into streets.
The wind surges again, stronger, hotter, with a roar that is no longer distant.
It's everywhere.
Up in the bomber stream, a crewman looks out and sees something that makes his stomach tighten. Not just fires, but a single immense glow spreading outward, swallowing whole districts until the city looks like a forge. He's seen targets burn before. Industrial areas.
Oil depots. A flare here, a blaze there. This is different.
This is a city turning into light. From miles away, the sky above Hamburg is bright enough to cast shadows on clouds. Even over the North Sea, other crews see it and fall silent for a moment, each man privately thinking the same thing. If it looks like that from here, what is it like down there? On the ground, the air raid sirens are meaningless now. The warning has become the event.
Streets are full of moving silhouettes.
People clutch suitcases that feel absurd against the scale of what's happening. Some stop and stare, unable to accept that the familiar shapes of their city, churches, bridges, tram lines, are dissolving into a single roaring color.
And inside the radar bunker, the snow begins to thin.
The operator blinks at the scope.
The interference fades in patches, like fog lifting.
Targets reappear, fewer now, strung out, heading back the way they came. The raid is leaving. It should feel like relief. Instead, the room goes quiet. Someone opens the bunker door. A gust of hot air spills in, carrying smoke, carrying the distant crackle of 1,000 burning buildings. The duty officer steps out and looks toward the horizon. Hamburg is a white-orange wound in the night, pulsing brighter with each moment, as if the city is being fed from below. And in that light, every man in that bunker understands the same brutal truth. The radar did not fail. It was defeated. And if the enemy can do this once, how long until they do it again? By the time the last bombers peel away into the night, Hamburg has stopped behaving like a city.
It's behaving like a storm system.
The fire has its own rules now, its own wind, its own pull, its own cruel rhythm. Streets that were safe 10 minutes ago become tunnels of heat.
Alleys become chimneys.
Courtyards become ovens. And the wind is no longer moving through the city. It is moving into the fire. People discover it the hard way. A family pushes out of a cellar door and immediately staggers back as hot air slams into them. It's like opening an oven, except the oven is the entire neighborhood. The mother tries to speak, but her throat is too dry, too scratched by smoke. The father lifts the smallest child and feels the child's skin burning hot through thin clothes. Panic makes them clumsy. They drop a suitcase. It hits the ground and splits open, spilling socks and papers into ash. You can almost feel the helplessness in that moment, the absurdity of belongings when the world itself is on fire. They try another street. The wind catches them like a wave. It doesn't just blow, it drags. It tugs at their coats, pulls at their hair, yanks oxygen out of their lungs and replaces it with heat and smoke. It's as if the fire is inhaling them. Somewhere nearby, a tram line sags and hisses.
Poles snap.
Sparks jump like frantic insects, igniting fresh points of flame. The air is full of cinders that land on shoulders, on blankets, on eyelashes. People slap at their own clothes with bare hands and don't realize they're burning until they feel the pain. The firefighters are still trying. A crew drags a hose around a corner and sees a row of buildings already fully involved. Windows glowing, roofs collapsing inward with a sigh that sounds almost tired. The pump operator yells for pressure. The hose shudders, spits water, then falters again. The water supply is shattered, and the men know it. They look at one another with the same thought, unspoken but heavy. We're fighting a thing that is bigger than our tools. They retreat, not because they want to, but because the heat forces their bodies to retreat.
Amans eyebrows singe off.
Another's gloves begin to smoke. They back away into a street where the air is merely scorching instead of murderous. And then the firestorm reaches the point where it becomes self-sustaining. The separate fires merge into a single great blaze that covers district after district. The rising column of hot air, enormous, hungry, creates suction at ground level. Oxygen is drawn in from all directions, rushing through streets at hurricane-like speed. The wind does not care if you are brave. It does not care if you are innocent. It does not care if you are trying to help. It only cares about feeding the flame. You hear it as a roar, not far away, but everywhere at once, like standing beside a waterfall made of fire. The sound is so constant that it begins to feel like the world's new normal. People who thought they could run learn that the wind can run faster. A man stumbles with his wife beside him, pulling their teenage daughter by the arm. They reach an intersection and the wind hits them broadside, spinning ash into their faces. The daughter coughs and coughs again, and the coughing turns into gagging. Her eyes are wide, glossy, terrified. The mother tries to turn back.
The father shouts something. The words vanish in the roar.
And then in a heartbeat the daughter is gone, not swallowed by a monster, not dragged into a dark hole, but lost in the simplest way possible, in confusion, in smoke, in the chaos of moving bodies. The father reaches, grabs empty air, and the wind pushes him forward as if the city itself has decided he no longer gets to choose. This is what firestorm does. It takes decisions away.
It takes direction away. It takes time away.
Near the Alster canals, people surge toward the water because water is the one thing that makes sense. They gather at embankments, at bridges, at any place where they can look down and see dark liquid reflecting the orange sky. Some climb down to the banks and press themselves close, breathing air that is still foul but at least cooler. Others wade in until the water reaches their knees, their waists, their chests.
And the firestorm keeps pulling.
Hot air rushes toward the center of the inferno, and even by the water you can feel it, a steady tug, like the fire has gravity. It's hard to explain unless you've stood in a wind that feels intelligent. Not random gusts, but purposeful movement. You can almost hear the city saying, "Come closer." Above, the sky is a bruised, boiling ceiling. The smoke column rises miles high, lit from below by the burning districts. Lightning flickers inside the smoke, not weather lightning, but the electrical fury of a city's infrastructure dying, transformers blowing, lines arcing, power tearing itself apart. It looks like the heavens are cracking open. If you're far enough away, it's horrifying and magnificent. If you're inside it, it's just endless. Somewhere in a shelter, the oxygen runs out. At first it's subtle, people grow sleepy, confused. Then they begin to panic because their bodies are screaming for air. A man pounds on the door, but outside the corridor is filled with smoke so thick it has weight. Someone opens the door anyway, just a crack, and the smoke pours in like liquid, rolling over the floor, rising fast. You can almost feel the terror of that decision. Stay and suffocate, or step into a world that is actively burning.
They step out.
And the heat hits them so hard it feels solid. The corridor is a tunnel of smoke, and the only light is orange. People cling to walls, stumbling, coughing until their ribs ache.
Someone screams for a child.
Someone else screams back, "Keep moving," as if movement itself is safety. But in the streets, movement becomes impossible in places. The firestorm's wind intensifies to such force that it can pull people off balance.
It can slam doors shut.
It can fling burning debris across roads like thrown knives. Flames leap from building to building not by crawling but by jumping, carried on the wind like living things searching for new flesh. And then the fire begins to create its own simple, brutal geography. There is the center, where everything is lost. There is the edge, where escape might still be possible if you move now. And there are the traps, streets that look passable until you turn into them and realize the air itself can burn your lungs. Above the city, the last bombers are already distant specks, their engines fading into the night. Some crews look back one last time and see Hamburg glowing so intensely it casts a faint light onto the undersides of clouds hundreds of miles away. In a Lancaster's rear turret, a gunner watches the blaze and feels his stomach tighten with a sensation he can't name.
It isn't triumph.
It isn't guilt, not fully. It's the feeling of watching a new kind of war being born.
Back in the radar bunker, the operator sits down hard, suddenly exhausted.
The duty officer's face is pale, eyes fixed toward the distant glow. Phones still ring.
Reports still come in.
Orders are still shouted. But the machine has shifted. Something fundamental has changed in the minds of the men who were supposed to see the enemy. Because tonight, for the first time, they were blind at the exact moment they needed sight. And outside, Hamburg keeps burning, not like a fire but like a force of nature. Then a message arrives from another sector, clipped and urgent. A second wave may be coming. The duty officer turns sharply. The operator looks back at the scope. And for a heartbeat, the green screen is clean.
Too clean.
As if the night is holding its breath again. Dawn doesn't arrive gently over Hamburg. It arrives like an insult. The sun rises into a sky that is no longer sky, but a ceiling of brown smoke smeared with red. The light is filtered sickly, and the city beneath it looks unreal. Blocks are flattened as if pressed down by a giant hand. Streets that were lined with familiar facades are now corridors of brick dust and twisted beams. Whole neighborhoods have become landscapes.
And the smell, it's everywhere.
Charcoal, melted tar, wet ash, something sharp and chemical from burned wiring and fuel. Each breath scrapes the throat. You can almost feel it in your own lungs, the way it makes you want to cough but also makes you afraid to waste air. Along the canals, bodies are pulled from the water. People who ran toward what they thought was safety, only to find the firestorm didn't stop at the edge of the river. It stole oxygen, stole strength, stole judgment. Rescue workers move like sleepwalkers, faces gray with exhaustion and soot, hands shaking as they lift the dead with a tenderness that feels too small for the scale of what happened. In the ruins, survivors emerge with the slow, stunned movements of people waking from a nightmare that kept going after they opened their eyes. They stare at where their street used to be. They call names into piles of rubble, listening for answers they don't really expect.
Somewhere a church bell rings, half melted, cracked, sounding wrong. Not a call to worship.
More like a warning that the world is broken. And miles away, in bunkers and command rooms, the men who were supposed to defend the city are trying to explain how a modern air defense system was made helpless by snow on a screen. In the radar station, the operator hasn't slept. His eyes are sandpaper. His hands smell like metal and sweat.
The scope is clean now, almost marking a perfect circle of calm after the storm.
The duty officer stands behind him with a clipboard full of reports. Night fighters failed to make contact.
Searchlights wandered blind. Flag fired without proper tracking. Communications jammed with confusion.
A defense machine designed for precision spent its worst hour guessing. They replay the night in their minds, hunting for the moment they lost control. Not when the first bombs fell.
Not when the city lit up.
When the picture on the scope turned to nonsense. A senior technician arrives from a regional command, a man with the careful posture of someone who knows his conclusions may decide careers. He listens, asks for times, asks for frequencies, asks whether the interference had pattern, whether it moved with the wind, whether it came in waves. The operator describes it as best he can. It was like glitter. Like the whole sky reflected.
The technician's face tightens.
He's heard something like this before. Not from Germany, but from whispers, from British discussions intercepted and half understood, from theoretical notes that never seemed urgent until now. He asks for samples, for anything recovered, for any strange debris reported by ground observers.
At first the request sounds absurd. Debris? From the sky?
In a city that just burned? But later, in fields and streets outside the worst zones, men begin to find it.
Thin strips. Metallis. Light as paper.
They cling to bushes. They lie in gutters. They hang from telephone lines like cheap tinsel after a ruined celebration. People pick them up, confused, and they flutter away again on the breeze. Someone brings a handful to an air defense office in a small envelope. The technician pours them onto a desk. They spread like harmless confetti. And every man in the room goes still, because suddenly the night makes sense in the most terrifying way.
It wasn't a breakdown. It was a weapon.
The technician holds a strip up to the light. It's cut to a specific length. Not random. Not debris from an aircraft. Not something that fell by accident.
Deliberate. Designed.
A deception you can mass-produce, carry in bundles, and release over an entire defense zone. In a larger headquarters farther inland, a meeting forms around maps and exhausted faces. Officers speak in hard-clipped bursts. There is anger, of course.
Anger at the enemy.
Anger at their own helplessness. Anger at the universe for allowing something so small to have such power.
The air defense commander demands, how soon can we counter it?
The technician answers carefully, because careful words are the only kind that survive in rooms full of blame. We can try filters. We can try frequency changes. We can try new plotting methods. But if they can lay this across our radar, they can choose when we see and when we don't.
Silence.
That sentence sits in the room like a weight. Because the implication is bigger than Hamburg. It means every night city, every factory complex, every port, every shipyard is now vulnerable to a bomber stream that can simply step around the eyes of the defense. And somewhere across the sea, the men who ordered the raid are reading their own reports. At Bomber Command Headquarters, the atmosphere is different.
Not relaxed, not celebratory.
More like a cold acknowledgement that the experiment worked, and the cost was visible from space.
Air Marshal Arthur Harris studies the maps, marking accuracy, bomb tonnage, time on target, losses.
The numbers matter because numbers are how you justify the unimaginable. An intelligence officer mentions the radar deception with professional understatement, as if he's describing a new type of wrench. The enemy's early warning was severely degraded.
Harris doesn't smile.
He doesn't need to. The result is the city still glowing on the horizon hours after the last bomber turned home. But even here, among men who speak in targets and tonnage, something uneasy hangs in the air. Because when a weapon is this effective, it changes the rules for both sides. If the British can blind radar tonight, the Germans can learn to do it tomorrow. War is a ladder. Every rung is built out of the last surprise. Back in Hamburg, the survivors don't care what the trick was called. They don't care which frequency was jammed. They don't care about the debates in distant rooms. They care that the air was pulled out of their lungs. They care that the night turned into a furnace. They care that their city became weather. And as the smoke column continues to rise, another sound begins to spread across northern Germany.
Not sirens, engines.
High and distant at first, a faint rumble that grows steadier, more organized. Someone on the outskirts looks up into the hazy morning and squints.
Tiny dots. A-Formation. Different shape than last night. Different rhythm. The sun glinting off wings.
Daylight is coming with aircraft in it. And Hamburg, still burning, is about to be struck again. The dots in the sky grow larger, and then you can hear them, an organized, steady drone that doesn't belong to a single aircraft, but to a formation.
People in the streets stop moving.
Not because they feel safe, because their bodies have run out of ways to react. A man stands in the middle of what used to be an intersection, ash clinging to his hair like gray frost. He looks up through the smoke-stained daylight and squints until his eyes water. The shapes above are bright, metallic, clean-edged, almost beautiful against the ugliness below. For a second, the mind does what it always does when reality becomes too large. It tries to shrink it. Maybe they're ours.
Maybe it's over.
Then the first distant thump rolls across the ruins, and the hope collapses like a roof under heat.
Operation Gomorrah wasn't a single night.
It was a rhythm, British bombers by night, American heavy bombers by day, designed to keep a city in a constant state of shock, exhaustion, and failure. The daylight attack comes high and relentless, the sound of engines layered like a choir with no mercy in it. Down below, flak still fires because it must.
Black bursts bloom in the sky like poisonous flowers.
Some shells drift too low and shower the streets with fragments that hiss in rubble. But the real defense, the thing that was supposed to predict and organize and intercept, has already been compromised in a way no amount of courage can instantly repair. Inside German command rooms, the foil strips sit on desks in neat, humiliating piles.
The weapon looks like nothing.
Like party decoration. Like trash. And yet everyone understands what it did. It turned the Kamhuber system, radar, plotting, controlled night fighters, into a man stumbling through fog with his arms out. It forced controllers to guess. It forced pilots to hunt shadows. It made the sky unreadable at the moment when reading the sky meant survival. In one office, a senior officer rubs his eyes and stares at a map with circles drawn around defended sectors. He doesn't say window out loud at first, as if naming it gives it more power. Then he says it anyway, bitterly.
A deception. A curtain.
A switch that can be flipped whenever the enemy chooses.
Outside, the consequences keep falling.
Some targets that look clear from altitude are actually wrapped in smoke. On earlier daylight runs, American crews reported heavy haze from the previous night's burning, smoke so thick it masked primary aiming points and forced bombs onto secondary targets. It's a small mercy for some and a cruel accident for others, because in a city like this, secondary still means streets and buildings and people who thought their suffering had already peaked. The raids continue across the days and nights, and the city's ability to respond keeps shrinking. Fire crews are exhausted. Water pressure is unreliable. Communication lines are snapped. Hospitals are overloaded. Roads are clogged with rubble and fleeing families. By the time the campaign's worst night is fully understood, the number is spoken quietly first, then more openly, because no one can keep it contained. Tens of thousands dead in the firestorm night. An estimated 40,000 lives erased in hours, many in shelters where the oxygen was stolen and replaced by heat and carbon monoxide. And then another number, equally staggering, but different in meaning. In the aftermath, roughly 2/3 of Hamburg's population fled.
Not a panic sprint.
A mass migration of stunned, hollow-eyed people carrying what they could, leaving behind a city that no longer felt like a place meant for humans. In the radar bunker, the operator finally steps outside in daylight. The world has color again, but it's the wrong kind of color. The horizon is bruised brown.
The air tastes scorched.
The sun looks distant and weak, as if it's ashamed of what it's shining on. He stands there with his hands at his sides, listening. Far off, you can still hear the crackle, small now, like the city is whispering instead of screaming. He realizes the sound will be with him forever.
Like tinnitus.
Like a memory that refuses to fade. Behind him, the scope continues its calm sweep, a perfect circle, a clean screen that feels obscene after the night's blizzard. He knows they will work on countermeasures. They will change procedures. They will attempt filters, new tactics, new training. But the feeling that stays lodged in his chest is simpler than doctrine.
They had an eye. And the enemy learned how to close it.
Across the sea, in British briefing rooms, crews talk about the night in fragments, about the glow, about the turbulence from rising heat, about the strange sense of flying toward a sun that had no business being up at midnight. They'll talk about fear and luck and the relief of crossing the coastline home.
And somewhere in the machinery of Royal Air Force planning, one conclusion hardens into policy. Window worked.
It worked so completely that it will be used again and again and again, because in war, once a door is discovered, you don't politely close it behind you. That is the true turning point hidden inside the tragedy. Not only that a city burned, but that the air war crossed a threshold into something colder and more modern. Bombs and engines were no longer enough. Now the battle would be fought in signals and screens, in what you could make the enemy see, and what you could make him miss. The radar operator looks back once more toward the smoke-dark skyline. He can still picture the moment the scope turned to snow. The moment the sky stopped making sense. The moment the night opened, quietly, efficiently, and the bombers walked through.
End.